Let's start up. We're at 7. This is a workshop, so I don't have to bang the gavel. It says after I do roll call, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Dan is excused. That looks like roll call. And I think our first item is the Conservation Advisory Committee Compost Working Group presentation on the 2022 Sustainable Beacon Compost Pilot Program. Did you all have that right? The Sustainable Beacon Compost Pilot Program, which a couple of us heard someone say multiple times Saturday until they got it right. But thank you.
We'll take suggestions for a snappier name if anyone has one.
Not a problem. Nice to see you, Amber.
Nice to be here. So good evening. We're here to provide an update to you and our community on the Compost Working Group's progress. We're going to briefly cover background of the program and progress to date, discuss what's ahead, and close out with what does success look like and some ways that everybody can support the program. But first, it's probably important to start with why composting is important. And it's important because all of our waste is burned at an incinerator. And incineration in general is bad for air quality and releases harmful toxins. So certainly want to avoid as much of that as possible. I'll also give my blanket statement that individual actions are very important and we all have a part to play, but the climate crisis we are in is created by systemic issues and can only be fully addressed by systemic changes. So while we do have some individual actions here, we also have some ways to address those systemic issues. So the first slide here, this group was formed in early 2020. It is an output of the Sustainable Beacon program, and you can read through some of the accomplishments here. I'm not going to cover everything. I think the most important thing is probably just a huge thank you to everybody involved. So we have had tons of volunteers, and I would be remiss in also not giving Mickey and the folks at the transfer station, plus Mark in the rec department, and of course Chris, Ben, all of our council members for their support. So thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. All right, so next slide. This is the bones of what this program is. This is what was proposed to the council in June of 2021. We had a budget amendment for a total of $8,000. We have offered the subsidized composting bins and found a hauler for the municipal drop spots. The actual costs are reflected here. Again, I'm not going to go into specific details. We're going to talk about each of these as we move along. So next slide. Starting with the backyard bins, these were sold for $10 each. We started around, I want to say the day after Thanksgiving. It was offered on the MyRec site, and the first batch sold out I think before we even knew it. It went like wildfire. So we offered another 50, and those also very quickly sold out, so lots of interest in this. Several of us has been at the transfer station for the past several days handing them out, and it has been just completely delightful. People are so excited about the bins, they're excited about the program, they're excited to compost, so it was just a very enjoyable experience. And we also got a bunch of people who just were like, what's going on here? How can I get involved? So we got tons of questions just from people dropping off stuff and like, how do we do this? So it was great. Next slide. This one is our municipal drop spots. So these are starting hopefully in about 2 to 3 weeks. There will be 3 locations, and these will be picked up weekly and available for 6 months. These can be used for most residential food waste, including meat and dairy, and these can also accept BPI certified compostable bags, which is really great and convenient. So there's a lot of flexibility here. I think the thing that I really want to point out is that this is really groundbreaking. We're the first community in Dutchess County to offer this. So I just think that's huge, and it may seem like a small first step, but just being the first to break this barrier in our county, I think is really significant. It's a really forward-thinking outlook for the city to take. It's a way to move towards more progressive waste systems, and hopefully we follow Westchester County, where there are over 20 communities offering this service. So we really hope that this is just kind of the first push, and that we get tons more communities involved, and that this just goes really well. I'm going to hand it over to Sergey, who will cover the next couple of slides, and then I will pop back in at the end.
Good evening. Sergey Krasikov, Chair of Conservation Advisory Committee. Next slide, please. All right, so a lot of this is about how do we communicate and how do we let people know about this program, that it exists, first of all, and second, how to participate in it correctly. So we have filmed and now editing 2 videos that will educate people in a funny way, I hope, how to actually do it correctly so that we keep our contamination rate low, so that people that do backyard composting have high success rates. They don't have to deal with rodents and like upset neighbors because of foul smells. We will be doing and are doing outreach to local publications, little blog. We are working with Ben, Mr. Mayor's assistant, to update the sustainability page and have compost guides on that Beacon sustainability page, and hopefully having a dedicated page with very simple URL, beaconnewyork.gov/compost. He's checking with the county if something like that is possible. And then obviously Facebooks and different communication campaigns. We have emails for all the people who have purchased the bins, and they've been pretty responsive. We have a dedicated email account, compost@beaconnewyork.gov. And several of us at CAC monitor this email, respond. We are also formed a help desk, a group of people in Beacon who know about composting, and they will be responding to particular questions as they arise through the program. Additionally, there will be each bin for the drop-off sites will have stickers provided by our hauler. We also, Mark Price agreed to, out of his budget, to pay for signs that will be displayed at each of the 3 drop-off locations. They're pretty small, but it's better than cardboard that we have access to. And next stage would be to create a proper signage, of which we'll have examples later. Next slide, please. So this is some examples of graphics we put together that are available as email links as on Facebook and other platforms. So one for the backyard bins and what can go in it, organic waste, and what can be composted. So these are just some of the examples. Next, please. And a very big portion of what we're doing, this is a pilot, is to collect data and understand where Beacon is. And Maggie Fay, one of our volunteers, she's a PhD in sociology and professional survey maker, so she created a series of surveys that will help us understand who is taking part in this program, what kind of level of knowledge they came into program with, what knowledge they developed through the program, and what are the kind of looks and aspirations for future of this program. So there will be 3 different surveys. Intake, we're mostly collecting background information, socioeconomic data, and level of knowledge of what compost is. Then we'll have implementation surveys through the course of the pilot, where we address challenges, successes. We have people reporting what they are diverting, how much compost they are taking out of the garbage stream. And then eventually at the very end, we'll ask people to do exit surveys, overall experience, where they see the compost program going forward. Do they feel like it's something that we really need to extend? We hope somewhere in the middle of the pilot, like 3-4 months in, to give an update to the City Council about where we stand, what is our anticipated diversion rate, how many people are participating. As far as we can estimate that, we will be weighing the bins periodically, the totes, the drop-off bins, to know, apart from self-reporting, what actually is going to be composted. And additionally, I had a preliminary conversations with Matt Landau, at superintendent of the school district, and they are interested to develop composting program of their own and potentially partner with the city on hauling so that we can achieve some cost saving. And they're forming a sustainability committee that will start looking into composting, and that's probably will come down the road. And I'm turning it back to Amber.
And I should mention that Maggie, Faye, and Faye Leone are also here, so thank you. So next slide. This is an area where we would definitely love your feedback and input on what success might look like. We have some ideas here. Ultimately, of course, we'd love to have the municipal drop spots continue past the 6-month pilot, maybe do another bin distribution because there was a lot of interest in that, and hopefully just expand in general. It is a short-term initiative. We've got 6 months, and in that short term, we're hoping to spark changes that reduce waste going to the incinerator and, of course, get feedback to continuously improve the services. And the last slide. So here are some opportunities. When I was on council and people presented, one of my questions was always like, do you need anything from us? How can we help? So we put together this very helpful list. So first of all, we hope that everybody will take advantage of the municipal compost bins, use them, tell us how it's going, provide your feedback, tell your communities about it. I do want to highlight one potential challenge we're working through. Sergey kind of mentioned it around signage for the drop spots. We really want to ensure folks know what the bins are and what goes in them and what does not, because there are consequences for contamination, so we want people to be successful. We're partnering with Mark and the rec department on some bootstrap signage. We might try and paint some of our own, whatever. And we do have stickers from the hauler, and we are co-locating trash bins, which is great. So thank you to the highway department from that. The visual I have here is just an example from one of the Westchester communities that if this does become a permanent program, we might want to consider more of an installation. So you've got the bins and then your trash and recycling and really high visibility signage. So something to consider. And then lastly, I'll call back to the systemic change and using your influence to get some other communities in Dutchess County to do this, and also other levels of government to support more sustainable waste streams. There's a lot of work that can be done to make composting a viable part of maybe even a pickup system in the future. So there's a lot of opportunity here, and we're really excited about it. And that is the end of all of our slides and pre-written notes, so we can questions or comments, feedback.
We're going to talk about this later in the agenda, but the council was talking about quarterly meetings, and the third one that's tentatively late September, we're looking at climate goals and infrastructure as a subject, and it would be great to have a report at that time for the community. Mm-hmm. So, we'll collectively, all of us, check in with each other and make sure that, the information is given at that meeting.
Yeah, that would be great. And, we mentioned Maggie and her research skills. We're so grateful for her design on that. So we're hoping that we will have some really good data to share and feedback from the program, and we're happy to do that along the way.
And the other thing that occurred to me kind of along the lines of communication is we had a meeting in February, I think it was, with Pete about our cross-platform communications. And so, I think we would all like to be helpful in making sure that it's not just up on the website, but that, we're getting across all the platforms the information that would be helpful to share.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
So just to point out, on Saturday, Faye and I were playing adults. Sergey was videotaping and putting together this video, and one, it was a lot of fun, and I just want to say thank you. So. Yeah,
thank you. I heard we have a cameo appearance, and I got to pop in the afternoon after being at the transfer station and was just kind of blown away by the process and all the effort that Sergey and all of there was students there at the time, but it was really exciting, so I can't wait to see it.
I have questions about the initial process for making sure people don't contaminate the compost sites.
Yeah.
I know, for example, I did one of the private ones that's offered here in Beacon, and when I initially first started doing it, there was actually an individual there when I dropped off who helped educate me as I was learning, so I don't know if there's considered capacity for that. And also, I'm just curious, because looking at the contract, which is later in tonight's, we're going to talk about that they were very clear, like any contamination, city deals with it. For example, stickers that are on fruit, that's a pretty common one that I still see even in the private one that's here in Beacon, so I didn't know what your initial thoughts were around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that we've also kind of struggled with, and I think, again, it'll come back to we've really got to get some good signage in and around the bins, like at the point where people are dropping off. We're all obviously volunteering on this and can't sit at the bins all day, every day. But we do have somebody was going to go at least once a week initially and kind of check on them and like visually inspect how things are going. So it's a little bit of a dirty job, but we appreciate that person's dedication. I think it is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but we'll do the best we can with the stickers on the bins, the trash located nearby, and the signage that we create. And Sergey, did you want to add anything?
Initially, we considered creating a barrier to participation in the form of compulsory survey and educations that people would have to take, and in exchange they would get a code to open the bin, and that would have been the process if we went with a different hauler, with a community compost program company. That was a requirement, but then the committee decided that it's better to make it more open to the community and not create extra barriers, and kind of we decided to have the bin open and available to anybody who'd come there. So yes, signage, communication through platforms on city platforms and in the press. We can potentially consider doing rollout on Saturday or Sunday as the first open day, so that volunteers can be there for a couple hours. Again, we definitely not going to be able to stuff it all day long, every day. I can promise that, but we can do our best.
And thanks for mentioning kind of the lock process. That was definitely a little bit of a big deliberation. It also adds cost to the bins. You have to like custom fit them for locks, and chances are people aren't going to relock them after using it. So it just seemed like you're creating this barrier for people that should be open. This is taxpayer funded, so it's their program. It's a trade-off, and I think we'll want to closely monitor it.
Speaking of community compost, are they continuing their program throughout this pilot?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
no change to the offerings that they have within our city. People are still using them, subscribed, so no change there. And they are still keeping their drop-off location, which I'm not totally sure where it is at the moment, but
Is it not still behind the VFW?
I believe so. I wasn't sure if they moved it, but that will still be there.
Got it. And one more sort of nitty-gritty question. I know that you said that you've been speaking to the schools about bringing them into this program potentially, which I think is great. There's a huge volume, obviously, within the school system. And I'm curious if there is sort of in the long-term roadmap bringing in restaurants and other commercial consumers into the program.
Some of that sits with you. Right now, this program is specifically for residential waste because of, we've got 3 kind of totes at each location. If a bunch of restaurants or businesses went and dumped in there wouldn't be room for anybody else. But I do think there's absolutely opportunity to expand and evaluate offerings for different types of businesses. And did you want to touch on the school?
And also on businesses, with CAC, we created kind of like blueprint of where we want to go, and one of the areas where we want to expand is collaborating with businesses and having, and we're starting a working group that's going to look into ways to work with businesses or create collaborations within business community. It's mostly spearheaded by Marisa Lamaco from Hudson Brewery, and they are doing this for the film plastics, collaborating with industrial arts and starting to talk to other businesses in Beacon. And that's something that one of the ways that we're looking to approach is have it come from the business communities, where we can provide guidance and examples and provide connections, but have it kind of internally grown out of the restaurant world, out of the delis and bagel shop world.
That's great. I'm so glad to see that it was able to be beyond backyard bins only, and that there are drop-off sites. It's just really a lot of work, and well done.
Thank you. I mean, we're obviously really excited about the drop spots, and as I said, it's groundbreaking for the county, and we hope that more communities will do it, because that just means that there's more leverage to make that part of the overall waste system. So we're really excited about it.
Do you need more budget from us? To mention the backyard signage, or the signs at the bins, is that something that you need additional funding for from the city potentially?
I think potentially one of the things we could do is, like, if we really are having a huge issue with contamination and want to try and address it through more visible signage. I mean, Sergey mentioned we are, taking a pretty scrappy approach initially, but that is something that could be considered. We would certainly welcome it, but. All right.
So, great, thank you so much. Keep working through, the city administrator and our climate smart coordinator, and we'll keep having at it.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. There's a couple of appointments. This one is ratification of Paolo Foscolo, Peter Stropoli, and Gavin Coughlin, or Coughlin, not sure which they pronounce it, to the City of Beacon Fire Department. That's Chris and Nick.
Yeah, I'll start, and then Nick probably has a portion of this. Typically, we used to have people go into one of the three companies, Beacon Engine, Mays Hook and Ladder, or Tompkins Hose. As we're consolidating fire facilities, we're also now consolidating the volunteers into just the Beacon Fire Department. So these are the first three volunteers in the City of Beacon Fire Department. The reason this is on the agenda is, as part of the charter, you have to ratify any firefighters that join the volunteer ranks. And Nick, correct me if I'm wrong on any of that.
No, that's correct, Chris. It's section 31-6 of the city code that requires the city council members to ratify the hiring of these individuals, appointment of these individuals to volunteers to the City of Beacon Fire Department. Well, a number of reasons. One of the primary is that the City of Beacon offers its volunteers the LoSAP program, a benefit for volunteering to the fire company. And as that's a benefit that is reviewed by the City Council and awarded to the firefighters at the end of the year, you need to ratify and officially recognize these three volunteers as being volunteers so they could then obtain those service awards. So that's the purpose of the consideration of ratifying these members to be as volunteers to the fire department.
So they'll be under the command of Chief Van Voris and also his Deputy Chief Leahy. And we're still taking more volunteers. So if you would like to get some experience as a volunteer firefighter, please call the city at 838-5000 and we'll put you in touch with the right person.
I happen to know one of the volunteers, Paolo, and I also know that he's a relatively recent transplant to Beacon, and I so admire that spirit of giving into a community, newly arrived, and it's nice to see volunteers stepping up.
Yeah. Cool.
So I'll just add, I've had an opportunity to observe the volunteer fire department and volunteer ambulance corps for 30 years. Obviously, the ranks have dwindled pretty significantly, and I think it's highly appropriate that we bring people in just into one of the companies. When I first started here, there was, a lot of pride between the different three companies. They each have a history. but we're at the stage now where it makes sense to do it this way. It doesn't mean that we can't honor the 3 historical volunteer companies in lots of different ways, but this is the right approach. So, anything else on this one?
No.
Okay. You've got a deputy clerk, Chris.
We do have a deputy clerk. So a few weeks ago, you approved the promotion of Amanda Caputo, who went from being deputy clerk to being municipal secretary and serving as staff for the planning and zoning boards. We canvassed the eligible list from civil service for people who had taken the test for deputy clerk. We interviewed 2 people that were reachable on the list, and Kimberly, or Kim, was our top candidate. So you have a memo from the current clerk, Ola Taylor, and Kimberly comes to us with a lot of office experience and has the customer service skills that we're looking for, because she will be somebody that deals with the public frequently on everything from dog licenses to birth and death certificates. So that's a good skill for that person to have. So if you point her next week, she would start in about 2 weeks.
Any issues? Okay. What this means, too, is that Amanda has gone downstairs.
She's still splitting time.
All right.
Yeah, and she'll be helping to train Kim.
Okay. And then the other change today is we had our new HR director turn up today, right?
Yes.
First day.
She
You didn't
turned
chase
up.
her. You didn't chase her away or anything.
I checked at 5.
She's coming back for a second day?
She promised to. Well,
Actually, I'm been texting her. She's fine.
wait till she sits through the department head meeting tomorrow.
Yeah.
That'll be the real test.
There you go.
All
Okay.
right.
Good. Next one is also Chris and Nick. It's regarding executing an agreement, authorizing the city administrator to execute an agreement with High-End Automotive for vehicle towing.
So for decades, the city had a towing contract with Servone Auto Body, and Vinny Servone retired last week and sold his business to an entity called High-End Automotive, Inc. that's going to still have the same facility. We're proposing to just continue the same contract because we actually have no other vendor within the city limits that has a storage yard for these vehicles. That's important because if somebody has to have their car towed, you want them to be able to get to the facility by walking or bus. And so we didn't want to go to somebody out in the town of Fishkill or the town of Wappingers. So this agreement is the same terms that have been approved by multiple councils before, and we have not raised the prices at all in many years. So it's a good deal, and I'm hoping they keep these prices for a while.
Do you have any insight into how many vehicles end up getting towed or abandoned? I noticed that was part of the contract, and I was just curious.
Not a lot.
Okay.
So the most frequent thing that we end up towing for is when we have snow emergencies and cars are parked like on Main Street and we're trying to clear the street. But our police have been really diligent about running people's plates, figuring out where they live, and then actually going to their houses and knocking on the doors. The people that most often get towed are people that have moved to town recently and they haven't updated the address on their licenses. Otherwise, we occasionally have a city vehicle breakdown that needs to be towed back to our garage for repairs. That's done under this contract for free. And the other thing is when we have accidents, which we've had on occasion, this company is responsible for towing those off the public roadways and cleaning up any broken glass and other materials left behind. So that and the snow is primarily when we do it. But we don't go around looking for people to tow.
I have a question about Section G, emergency situations. Is there an example where the police department has had to end or pause the agreement?
Can you say the section again, please?
Sorry,
Justice?
section G, page 2. Of,
Yeah.
Emergency situations. Has there ever been a time, or is there an example of a reason why the police department might pause or suspend this agreement?
I'm not aware of them suspending the agreement. I think that was just kind of a catch-all in case something came up that people didn't anticipate. And it's like, okay, we can suspend this contract. And I would guess that would be an event. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, one of the reasons that was in the initial contract was just in the event that we had a bad performance with the company, that they weren't able to respond to the police in terms of clearing vehicles from an accident when needed, we wanted to provide an out. And maybe it was, for example, one of their pieces of equipment went down, so we needed to suspend it for 2 weeks and make sure the police had the appropriate response time. That was the intent in that paragraph, is my recollection.
Thank you.
And Nick, you drafted this in 2013, right?
That is correct, yes. And it's
Okay.
worked well since then. We've had both the vendor and I think the public have been well served by it, and the city.
Okay.
Also on page 6, section 2, I guess subsection B, there is a typo. The word agreement is spelled wrong in the 3rd line there, but that's.
Got it.
Thank you. We'll fix that, obviously. Thank you.
Let's just put in there to make sure you read it.
Other is also spelled wrong 3 words later.
No, not running spell check.
I'm not the attorney.
Yep, corrected.
All right.
He has a good memory.
Everything else all right?
I guess I just have one more question for clarification. The page prior, 5, those charges, all of these charges, so like the charge for a snow removal, that money goes directly to the towing company, the $25?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
Yeah, the city doesn't derive any revenue out of towing people. We simply have the service to get the cars out of the way so that we can finish plowing the streets.
Okay, thank you.
So anyone that has lived in New York City and tried to have a car that where you didn't pay an arm and a leg for parking, you will have undoubtedly have had your car towed at least once. And the experience in New York City, as I recall, was not fabulous and incredibly expensive, but no other comment.
Chicago was worse. It was just like, where's my car? And it would take some days to figure it out.
Yeah.
In my condominium, the minimum charge is $300. So this is really good.
Yeah.
Goodwill goes a long way.
Yeah. Okay. Another one is authorizing the city administrator execute an agreement with C.R.P. Sanitation for organic waste pickup and composting. Chris?
Yeah, so normally we don't have to bring contracts below $10,000 that have been budgeted. I did want to bring this because it follows on the presentation and I wanted you to see some of the details. C.R.P. owns both the disposal company and their partner organization owns a New York State DEC licensed facility to do municipal composting. And the difference, if you've never seen a municipal composter, the reason you can put certain things like bones and other less easily composted materials in it is because it's just done in a way that the temperatures are really high. It composts the material quickly. So things that you wouldn't normally put in your compost at home, like shells and bones and meat and dairy products, you can actually put in this. But again, they don't like stickers. So we're going to hope people don't put stickers in it. So this is a 6-month pilot, and again, we'll assess and see how it goes. I'd like to understand if the locations are the best locations. We had thought about putting one at the school, but then it's like, then you have summer break, and it kind of disrupts that. But again, I think the data is the most valuable thing out of this to figure out how we can do this more effectively in the future.
Is there any tracking of how many bins there? I guess they're just picking up the one on a weekly basis at each of the sites, or are there possible for multiple bins on a?
No, there's multiple bins. So we have 10 what they call toters, and they'll be split amongst the 3. So you'll have 3, 3, and 4. And then we're also going to have garbage cans co-located there so that if somebody, I don't know, is just dumping a bag of garbage, they have somewhere else to put it that doesn't contaminate this.
I'm wondering, too, if they'll keep, maybe this is a question more for CAC, like keep track of how many totes are determined to be contaminated, like how often, to kind of to right size the level of the issue that we might
We
be
can keep
facing?
track of that because they have to notify us if it's contaminated. And that gives us the choice to go and quickly clean it out. Like if somebody just put, some cans and bottles on top, we can send somebody to clean that out. Or if it's really contaminated, we would just have to dump it as garbage and pay a fee. And that's why in the contract, we left ourselves the ability for C.R.P. to pick it up as garbage or for Royal to pick it up as garbage. Okay.
Okay.
I'm glad that we're getting a lot of data, both from the vendor and from the surveys. It just strikes me as a really well planned out pilot program on multiple levels, and I'm excited to see how it goes.
Cool. And the CAC did a great job. Like, we didn't have the bandwidth to do this, so they developed all of the materials and the program and the promotion and figured out whether these were going to lock or not, where they were going to be. They worked with Mark Price to find the best locations. So I just want to thank them for the work they did. All right.
So bones go in the, not the backyard program, but the pickup program, right?
Same with compostable plastics.
Oh, that doesn't go in the backyard?
No.
Okay.
It takes quite a bit to cook those down.
Those say on the packaging for industrial composters
Yeah.
when you look at them. I guess maybe this should have been a question while Amber and the CAC were here, but are there, we have the backyard composters for homeowners, but will there be any available to have placed in apartment complexes as well?
We didn't limit them to homeowners.
Okay.
So if you lived in a complex where you had the room and the ability to do it, you could subscribe to that.
Okay.
Yeah. And one general rule on this is that when in doubt, throw it out. It's better to err on the side of throwing something in the garbage than contaminating. And because certain things can contaminate a whole load of recycling or of compost. And yeah, Faye and I did a tour of Republic Recycling, and some of the things that they've gotten there are ridiculous. Bowling balls, iPhones, I don't know, all kinds of stuff.
But that's less of an issue with compost, right? Other than bones. and,
Bowling balls? I don't know. People. We'll have to see. This is why we're collecting data. Yes, it should be less.
It should be less. I mean, what else is there other than those little, the plasticware?
Well,
bones? Anything else?
Waxed paper is an issue. So if you have unwaxed paper and it's soiled with food, like a cheap plate, that can be composted. If you have something with a waxy exterior, that's a lot harder to do. Mm-hmm. And they say they have that on the list of prohibited items.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my recollection in the last conversation with Republic was one of the biggest issues in recycling, not composting, was plastic bags. And people tend to put their recycling in plastic bags, and the plastic bag screws everything up.
Yeah, if you put it in a plastic bag, unless it's clear, it gets thrown out.
Yeah. So.
Ben let me know that they can't really hear us, so use your mics, please.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Now,
Good.
This is very important, this next thing.
All right. So this is a discussion regarding Oh, potholes and our children, right?
Yes. So last week, as all of you know, we were informed by a prominent citizen of our good city that potholes were consuming cars and consuming children. And so we have put a new report a pothole on our website page to make sure that we can feed those potholes the asphalt and chip that they so love after hibernating all winter rather than eating cars and children.
Right, and it actually makes a ton of sense to do right in March, right? This is the right time to do it. And, you know, everywhere I go, we're undoing our potholes from the winter. So it's cool. And we got them on our website.
It's on our website, and of course, with 50 miles of roads, we don't see every pothole. So let us know where they are. Let us know the nearest intersection. We'll be doing cold patch for the next couple of weeks until the asphalt plants reopen, and then we'll have hot patch, which is more durable. And we're also, during the capital budget, going to be bringing you a hot box proposal so that we have in-house capability of doing hot patches before the asphalt plants open.
So if I'm a community member who fills out this new feature on the website, which I'm really a fan of, should I expect a response, and or should I expect the pothole I reported to be filled in a certain number of days or weeks?
Typically, we've been filling them in 2 to 3 days. So, and I can check in whether, these go right to Ben, so I'll make sure he responds. You hear that, Ben?
Yeah, haul them out of here.
Got it.
All right, excellent.
That was
And
the
that's
wizard.
all you have to say when you respond. Just got it.
Got it. And we're
Period.
Okay.
Smiley face.
All right.
Cool. Actually, I think it's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm joking around, but thank you, Teresa, for, yeah.
It's a good solution, so. Okay, next one is a discussion regarding community quarterly. Who wants to pick that up?
I can start us off.
Okay.
It's a idea that our all council members had as we were looking at our platform that we all ran on and trying to reconcile that with what we are going to then do in our terms. And one of the items that we ran on was making government more accessible. And so one of the ideas that we had was to have these quarterly public forums to get direct feedback from the public about thoughts that you all have about issues that you're experiencing, and thought that we would try and theme them based on also the calendar of, or the agenda that we had also set out. This was all discussed in our January 10th meeting, if anyone wants to refer back to it. But we also, this is a new thing, and so we took some time to figure out how to best do it. And so what is on the agenda for tonight is just an initial framework, an idea of how to run these forums. And so very happy to have this be a very open conversation. I would, just to try and focus us a little bit, I wanted to sort of have two central topics. One was to make sure that we're on the same page about the 3 goals of this framework, and then also make sure we're on the same page about the central question or topic for our first one. And I guess the third one is setting a date and location ideas. So I don't know if anyone else wants to hop in with initial feedback or thoughts. I could also read the 3 goals. That would be helpful. Great. So the 3 goals were accessibility, engagement, and follow-through. The first one, we want to keep the barrier to entry and participation as low as possible. There are 2 tiers of involvement in this model from the public's perspective. One is to craft and present an idea on the given topic, and 2 is to read up on the ideas and vote on which ones you think the best are. So creating an idea or just simply checking a box, though I also think We can figure out if that's a ranked choice voting situation or just like a one, but vote on it. The second idea of engagement is that the central purpose here is that we want to gather ideas and feedback from the public. We're not just pitching ideas that we as the council already have on our own to the public. We do that pretty much constantly already, but we still must provide some basic framework and information to the question or topic. For example, you'll notice one of the criteria is that what the ideas have to be within the scope of municipal government. So we can't be building any rocket ships, unfortunately. And then the third, well, maybe Chris can. And then the third is follow through, which is obviously an important part of any sort of engagement effort. We want to frame this in a way that we can follow through on the ideas, and whether it's through a direct action by the council or a referral to, NASA, or a relevant body that can actually better execute the solution that everybody wants. So that's part of why you'll notice that some of the parameters are trying to make it fairly doable or manageable, given that this is a new thing that we're adding to everybody's plate. Should I go over the framework?
Yes, please.
Great, okay. So this is, I should note that this was sort of drafted in conversation, or at least with some input from Ecological Citizens Project, which is, they ran something called the Hudson Valley Community Congress. And so this is a tested model. And they do a number of different community engagement and civic engagement projects, and some other ideas, including ideas around participatory budgeting, which we'll be talking about in a couple of weeks, and is a separate process that is another form of civic engagement. So step one is where we're at right now. We need to clarify our topic. And the idea here is to phrase our topic into a central question. There is something that we're trying to solve collectively. The second step is to solicit ideas from the community to that central question. And some ideas for criteria for that submission are that it must be led by an individual Beacon resident or a Beacon-based group or organization. I would include in that any of our city committees, any department within the city, and then obviously any community group that's based in the city. Ideas need to be submitted in advance of the forum, and that will become clear why later. And they need to both point out a need or address the central question and offer a solution. This isn't just a complaint box. You're welcome, the public is welcome to send complaints to us, but that's not the purpose of this particular event. And then just to keep it moving, then those ideas would be presented by a representative of that group or by that individual in a public event. The idea in this model is that the solution can be presented in 3 to 5 minutes so that we can get through all of the ideas and to try and keep it as sort of clear as possible. At any point, either here or before, the council can decide to sort of pare down the ideas. If we get 200 submissions, that would be great, but maybe we can't spend many, many hours listening to everybody's ideas in a public way. And the fourth step is to then take those ideas and distribute them in a ballot or survey format. And that's part of the purpose of having it be, the solution be summarized in a few sentences so that the ballot also isn't 200 pages long, but is readable and doable, and somebody can sort of read them and think about them and then vote in maybe 10 minutes. And then at the end of that, we would announce the results and then would have a sort of list of priorities as council to inform what we keep on the agenda or move up on the agenda or add to the agenda, and do that follow-up through aspect of the goals. Second pause for feedback. I know you all have thoughts.
I really appreciate you putting this together, Paloma, and taking the lead on this, taking this idea that we had as a collective and putting it into practice. I was wondering if there's, thinking about this idea of being as accessible as possible to as many people as possible, if there's some thought on what mechanism they can use also for it to be something that we can sort of gather and compare across. Is it like a Google form or something like that they can sort of, and it kind of guides them through it so they're able to know, like, okay, this is what I fill out. No, that people might choose to tell us on the sidewalk, like they don't have to do it that way, but some way that we can sort of track all of them.
Are we talking about the soliciting ideas section or the voting section or both?
I think the first section, about like, you have an idea and how sort of putting in the framework that we can then assess what might make it to the public part of the idea. I have second thoughts about that, but you can address that first.
Yeah, I think it would be a Google form. That's another reason why we want the sort of solution to be have a very short form that is maybe 1 to 2 sentences, which would be the solution part. And then if they want to explain more what they mean, they're welcome to write that down, or speak to any of us and talk it out.
I spoke to a community member today who I think you also spoke to today, who had some ideas about there might actually be an app that would help us.
Okay.
So, he's going to explore that on his own, and if it's possible, why not, right?
Yeah, and I think that a Google form would be helpful, but I also think if somebody can't figure out a Google form and wants to email us or call us and submit their idea that way, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. One other step in the process, and Chris and maybe Nick, I don't know if you have thoughts about this, is to the rocket ship thing. I think there are other things that we might not even know. Let me rephrase that. I might not even know are actually not within the purview. I think you've brought up the example a couple times, Chris, of heating elements or sort of stoves within houses are actually controlled by the Department of Environment. They're not controlled by us, like at the city. So I think there might be other things that people have ideas about, like controlling traffic lights, that actually we might not control. So I'm wondering at what point would be a review of people's ideas and make sure we don't get too far down the road of exploring something that actually we don't have the authority to do. And we would get back to the individual and tell them that. We wouldn't just drop their idea without letting them know, but I'm wondering about the process of that, and I have no idea how many we're going to get, so I'm mindful of your time, Chris and Nick's, to review all of them, but wanted that to be part of our process as well.
Nick, to you.
Well, I guess in my mind, when you don't have the authority for something, it's pretty easy for us to identify that early on in the process. So I think as soon as you have a list that you think you want to move forward with, if that's just sent to us, generally we can tell you that yes, no, or maybe it requires more research. And then if it's going to take a significant amount of time, then we can discuss with Chris whether that advice as to whether something is or with outside of your authority is going to require more time.
Yeah, so maybe we plan into the process that submissions have to happen by a week before the event, and then we send the list to Nick, and he can confirm for us.
And I'll review it as well, Molly. I just wanted to make sure Nick was okay with doing that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be an important step, because I'm just trying to think through, I've had a lot of opportunity to receive input from folks over the years, and kind of the most immediate ones, like on the weekend, someone was asking me about, a short-term rental situation adjacent to their home, and, I'm listening, and my comment was, send me an email, make sure you tell me the address and the issue, and then I can forward it, which I did today. I forwarded it to the building inspector, copying the city administrator, without issuing instruction to the building inspector. I was very cautious about that. And we'll let the city administrator determine, and all I asked was, could you just put me on the response, right? So, that's kind of one. The other one that I got one regarding Central Hudson and billing, which we have no authority over. But the one thing that we can do is ask them to come and speak and ask them to, provide communication that's effective in the community. So I think it's going to be important, because if you get open ideas, a lot of them are either something sometimes we can't do, or some things we've already done, but it hasn't been fully communicated to everyone, and so someone's asking a question that we know an answer to. So I just think that would be an important piece of the review process.
May I offer a suggestion? So two suggestions. One is, for your first one, maybe think about something, a smaller topic that's more tangible. And I'm thinking, we're about to launch our recreation study, and maybe perhaps a topic could be, what do you think of our recreational facilities and programs? How would you augment those, or what's missing? And that also can inform our study. It can be another part of that study, and that way it's kind of focused. It's not, it won't necessarily take you to places where we don't have authority, like we have authority over parks. And then you can actually get some ideas for what we might put in the parks. And this is similar, like Dan brought to us the fact that some equipment hadn't been replaced at Green Street last year, and we found the money to replace it, and it's on back order due to limited supplies, but it will be implemented. And we could actually do then tangible things that reinforce that participation. The second thing I would just say is, on your timing, doing the budget and capital plan together might not make sense. And what you might want to think about doing is, we're going to be presenting the capital plan in late April or early May, just so you know the timing and can plan accordingly. And then we don't propose our budget until September, the operating budget. So you might think about separating the two of those, because one is really long-term projects, and then the other is recurring programs. And that's just some feedback for thought.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Chris. And I know that this is logistically not a light thing to be doing, and so absolutely want to have that open line of communication if this is putting an extra burden on your work at any point. And I also want to note that one of the sort of theories of doing this is that it's not just feeding ideas to the council, but also allowing people to put their ideas out into the community and find sort of allies for their work. So even if it is something that ends up not being within the scope of municipal government, they have that idea out there, and maybe we'll find other people who are interested in going to advocate to the county legislature about it, or NASA, or whomever it is that actually this is relevant to, and that's an intentional byproduct of the process.
Yeah, I like the idea. I think asking about recreation is timely, right? We're collecting feedback right now, and this could be another mechanism for receiving that feedback. It might be utterly repetitive, I don't know, but I think this is the time to ask. I think in contrast, the one that's on the page as a possibility is community safety and police reform. I think we've have received a lot of input over the last couple of years on that, and I'm not sure that is going to give us new material, and especially if we've got a police advisory committee that's going to be reading out some sort of progress to us. I think it might be more appropriate to wait for them, and recognizing they've had a couple of years of input already. So that would be my 2 cents.
I would just like to throw out there that I would still like to have at least at some point a community discussion around community safety and police reform. I don't think there could be, and I don't think there's a limit to how many ways people can feel safe. And I would like to make sure that I'm hearing from everyone. But if the recreation is timely and it makes sense to do that first, I am definitely open to that.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned that this would be redundant to the recreation study, since we did hire a consultant to do a comprehensive outreach strategy, though it is an essential topic. And in terms of the Police Advisory Committee, I think that their work is parallel but not redundant to a process like this, in that they don't have they have received a lot of feedback and have processed a lot of information, but they don't have an outreach arm that I'm aware of. And this would be doing that. And I also just have a general question. I wasn't sure when we would be hearing a report from the Police Advisory Committee, so hadn't really considered that in the timeline here.
Yeah, because what I was thinking was that we would coordinate this with them, and that if they had some sort of readout and then said, okay, we'd be looking for something, that would kind of be a better fit. If we do it in isolation, I'm just a little concerned that it may run, either it might be repetitive, or even if it's new, that's great, but I just want to have it kind of coordinated with them.
And we tentatively were looking at a report out this summer.
Yep.
We don't have a date yet.
No, I like the climate, although I'm not sure how climate goals and infrastructure are added together. Those strike me as being distinct. And we might want to look at kind of climate and recycling and other programs kind of collectively, because what people are interested in, and I know we did some outreach to see what people were interested in already, but if we put on the table, here are things that are done and here are some additional possibilities, we might get some interesting input there and some interesting ideas. But again, that's just, I'm just trying out different things. It's not like I know the answer.
Yeah, I think the idea is that we had these sort of in broad buckets on purpose, and part of the purpose, or part of the design of this process, is that you maybe get ideas that are completely different from each other, and we don't need synthesis amongst all of the different ideas that are actually put out to a vote. They can be very different. It's about getting putting something out there and having the community react to it.
Right, but let me give you an example of why I'm concerned about infrastructure. Infrastructure is a complex issue, and it has water, sewer, roads, sidewalks, our building facilities, and it's just kind of hard to see how a suggestion on those areas would affect our thinking, right? I mean, we should build more dams, or I don't know how that would work. That's why I said that one struck me as not sure an appropriate topic, right?
Sure. Would it make more sense if we said climate goals and green infrastructure?
Yeah, that's why I was thinking as that area, because we've talked about wanting to advance the community in terms of our carbon footprint, everything we do in terms of the environment. I think we'd get a rich set of ideas. Mm-hmm. Most of them have come out before, okay, but there might be some new ones in there, or it might help us set some priorities. That's why I kind of like that bucket. But again, if you say green infrastructure, that would be different, right?
Yeah, if I recall, that was sort of the intention of putting them together, but totally appreciate that that's not what it said.
I'm just saying, we shouldn't offer up ideas for new dams, right? It's not that it wouldn't be a good idea, it's just, it's a very complex and expensive idea, right?
I'm kind of, I mean, I'm fine. It's our first time doing this, so I'm fine to throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. And with that in mind, keeping it broad is fine for me. We could even, to me, the rec study could even be seen as part of community safety in terms of the thread that holds the community together. So I'm fine to have that. And then as this is a council-led project, I'm hoping for, you even put in here, Paloma, that, for staff time or anyone even on the council who doesn't feel that they have as much time to give to this one, that we can, talk amongst ourselves about what makes that manageable. And I would say, I do the last part when it comes to, this is going to become, has set of priorities to move forward in getting work done. I am somewhat cautious about that because I don't know, even if there's a great thing that comes out of that, is that something that we have capacity to do and have the city staff that might require to do? So I don't want to mislead the public, but I feel like what a lovely problem to have the community really rally something, and then we can kind of get into, why is it not doable right now? What has to happen? Well, what does that mean for what has to be in place for it to happen? So I'm willing to kind of get into that and see where it leads. I would rather have that problem than nobody shows up. So.
Yeah, I think key to the success of these meetings is reaching out to as wide and diverse group of people, which is really difficult. The few times we've done.
George, can you speak up?
The few times we've done the comprehensive plan, there was great effort put into getting people out, and a lot of people did come out, but not 15,000 people came out. So I worry too that whatever we glean from this process, that it truly represents a diverse group of voices and is not necessarily co-opted by the most active people. And there's a lot of people that are inactive. They're kind of paying attention, but I think we have to be overly cautious to who we're listening to, and if it truly represents the diversity of our community. So, that's the way I'll be looking at it all the time. So I think key to it is trying to encourage as many people to participate in this as possible. So, and I think that should be our first goal, is figure out how best to do that.
Agreed.
Yeah, it is a sort of pitfall of these sort of some certain community engagement efforts that you are just collecting information from the people who are already speaking. And that was part of the intention of the accessibility goal of trying to make it easy to participate. So even if you're one of those people who's listening a lot but don't really necessarily want to get out there and say what your idea is, you can still vote on it if you know it's happening. Any other ways that we can be trying to make this accessible and reach other people I agree, is important.
So I guess my question is, what happens now as far as planning this first meeting? Like, what do we want our timeline to be? Where do we want this to be? And would we do hybrid like we do these meetings for sake of accessibility? Also, there was mention of putting money in budget for Spanish language outreach materials. Is that also, are we planning on having a Spanish translator at the event? I'm throwing this out to the council and not just like putting this on Paloma.
Yeah, when we were discussing, the last time I remember at least the council having a conversation about Spanish language translators, it was when we were trying to get one for our swearing-in ceremony, which ended up being downsized quite a bit, and we were going to pay for that out of pocket. But I don't know if there is a budget somewhere else for something like that.
I'll have to check, but I don't believe so. I don't think we have a line for events, but let me check it while you're here.
Great.
I don't think it would be hard to translate a document, right? I think that's reasonably inexpensive, right? I think the issue is
A live
is
interpretation.
live, yeah, right? Because when we looked at, doing something on meetings, it was like, if you need something live, that's expensive. If you want to use a service that can kind of provide an instant translation through technology, that's a lot less expensive, right? So.
With that in mind, is there the option, because I think we talked last time, we talked about this, that YouTube has that functionality, is that right? Is that something that we could potentially, if we did a hybrid meeting, if we could stream it on YouTube through the city's site? So
It's
that,
not live translation. The subtitles are added afterwards in a different language.
oh, they are? Oh, okay, thank you.
Well, the other thing we could do is try one out, and if we discover demand for the service, then we could add it as we go, right? Kind of one way of kind of gauging, is there a sufficient need, and then we can provide.
That could also, I mean, just throwing this out there, be a part of the survey or the questionnaire that people are filling out when they're engaging in this and they want to actively participate. If they're filling out their answers in Spanish, or if we have the option for them to submit in Spanish, or just even a question that's like asks if they need this in Spanish, need some sort of translation if they don't have one available.
Right.
You have a materials and supplies budget of $500 in the adopted budget. So that could cover your printing for the flyers and perhaps some food for the event, which is helpful to kind of have that more social element.
Yeah, that reminds me, I didn't, this is written in the document, but I didn't say this part out loud. Part of the design of the live event is to have those presentations, and then we can decide if we want to have a Q&A, a live Q&A portion. The recommendation that I got is to not have a live Q&A portion, but to have a social component at the end, so that if people have follow-up questions, they can do so in that way.
Yeah, I do think that's a good way to gauge, potential demand, right? Is if we ask for it in multiple languages and get some responses in it, that's telling you something, right? And if we only get a few, that's telling you something else. So that will help us figure it out.
I think in terms of timeline, to go back to your original question, Justice, I think if we could set a tentative, at least, date for the event itself, we can sort of work forward and backwards from there a little bit. I had put out the 16th, 24th, and 30th as possible Saturdays or Sundays that don't have holidays on them as well. I don't have strong opinions about a time of day. I thought an afternoon could make sense. And in terms of a location, I had heard the idea of the VFW hall, or perhaps the firehouse's common area. Obviously, have not actually asked any of those people yet if the space is available.
The 16th is right before Easter Sunday and the end of spring break week, so just a warning that we could get low participation on that date. Mm-hmm. But the other two make sense.
Are those meant to be Saturdays?
It's a mix of Saturdays and Sundays.
Yeah.
I think the 24th is a Sunday and the 30th is a Saturday.
Yeah, that's Greek Easter, just so you know.
Which one?
The 24th.
Got it. So maybe the 30th?
It's all right. So I'm just pointing it out.
Yeah, it's also the, I believe, the last day after Passover.
Yep.
So.
And I believe the 16th, therefore, would be the day before what Greeks call American Easter. So,
yes.
Just so you know, that's the lingo we use.
Also my mother's birthday.
The 16th?
Well, we can't do it on George's mother's birthday, so how are we feeling about the 30th?
So.
Well, I think if we're trying to get as many people out, I think we need as long as window as possible to communicate to the people. So I think going further out is probably the safest if we want to get a good enough attendance.
Yeah, I think I also, to the point that of the person that the person that Ren and I were speaking to, named Brett, there's a benefit to not being too precious about all of these steps. That part of the idea is to do this fairly rapidly, actually, so people don't lose interest over time. We are doing this. We set an intention to do this 4 times a year, and so I don't want us to burn out on the first try.
Yeah. So to that point, I agree with what George said. You know, give us a long lead time. Also, April 23rd is Beacon Earth Day cleanup from 9 to 12, and then a party afterward at Hudson Brewery. So, you know, we want to be clear of that event as well, too.
Okay. That gives us the longest lead time, in which case I think it would be, I would suggest that we try and come to some consensus about the topic and leave this up for maybe initial public comment this coming Monday. See if there are any sort of strong feelings out there that we haven't heard yet. And then move forward with rolling it out from there.
So again, in terms of topic, I think that the timely one relates to recreation, right? Because that's about, we're in our collection phase. I mean, we could do something on climate and environmental stuff sooner rather than later, but I think if we were to use the rec topic 6 months from now, it won't be relevant. So I would suggest we go with that one. See what you all think about that.
Could you phrase that into a central question? What it is about recreation that you want to know from the public?
What do you want? Are there priorities for, and okay. How do you define recreation and community services broadly, and what should be included in that idea? Because I think we use the term rec as a shorthand for actually more than that. Like one of the things that I've heard from folks, and I recall because I was here, is that the MLK Center that was on South Avenue at Beacon Street offered things like tutoring and not just recreation. And in fact, you know, the council member that I gave up my seat for her to run, Eleanor Thompson, used to run that. And I think we missed that piece. And to me, that's part of what I call recreation, but it doesn't fit. So it's almost like you want to ask the question, what sort of community programming are we looking for? And, you know, don't think just recreation, what else, right? Because if I were to ask where our gaps were, I would say our gaps are more on, you know, maybe along the lines of tutoring and other things as opposed to recreational programming per se. So I don't know if that translates to a question, but maybe something along those lines.
I will just jump back into the current proposed topic of community safety and police reform, specifically community safety. I do think recreation falls under that umbrella because in talking to people about what community safety is to them, you know, and going back into like what the old recreation centers used to be with the MLK and the former BCC, which is now just we know as Beacon Rec, you know, the BCC offered affordable childcare, which is to some people what community safety, that falls under the umbrella of community safety as well. So I think it is a large umbrella and there are a lot of things to consider under that. And I think it is a topic worth exploring, and I think recreation can fall under that. And I do just want to say I think it might be okay to have a larger or even broader topic for the first session, especially since we don't know how much engagement we will have. And I think the more ability there is to get people to engage, the more we'll be able to grow this and continue community engagement. And it's not like we have to address everything that is brought up in these community quarterly meetings at our very next city council meeting. We can figure it out and pace ourselves through time, and not everything we will be able to address, as mentioned before. But I definitely want to hear from people who, especially people who feel like they haven't been heard.
Could you phrase what it is that you want to know about community safety into a central question?
Absolutely. What does community safety mean to you? What does it mean to feel safe in the city of Beacon? What is the city missing in order for you to feel safe?
I have a variation on that too, Paloma, when you're done typing.
Molly's turn.
What do you see as a key Beacon community connection and safety need that the city should be providing?
I like that.
And that you can have a follow-on sentence depending on how this is literally framed that says, that makes mention of the rec study, like it can be connected to that, but it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, no, because safety is also, it's it's fire safety, it's emergency response, it is access to food and housing. There are so many things that fall underneath that, and if there is a certain level of response for certain subjects, then we'll know as a council that's what we should be focusing on.
I am not officially speaking for Dan at this moment, but when we had been talking about this a few weeks ago, he did express a concern about sticking with the topic that we said we would do in the first one.
A concern meaning he wanted to switch it, or he wanted to stay with what
He
we
wanted
proposed?
to do what we told the public we were going to do.
Oh, so a concern we're doing something different.
Sticking with it, yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I'll have to call you out, Ren.
Well, I think that community safety and police reform is a good broad umbrella that catches a lot of what we have been. I believe that the police reform committee recommendations mentioned a community center as a possible measure, and the recreation study is very tightly linked to that. And it would get us out ahead enough from the capital plans and the budget plans to sort of just see what ideas are out there in the community other than those that we were discussing in our platform that were related to what the police reform committee had come up with. I wonder if we could call them and see if they have, because even if this is the topic, Mayor and Council, I think that we would have a little bit of a description, right? We won't just have this broad heading. We will have these questions. We'll figure out how to articulate in a clear way that gets the kind of response that we're looking for. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, Justice, community safety, public safety, the need that the community feels that they need. I know that I don't see it as any different as sort of what we've already been talking about with the rec study. Yeah, started out strong and ended up weak, but I don't know.
No.
I just see those community safety and police reform topics as related to the recreation study in a broad way. I think that the recreation study comes as part of that, but there are probably a lot of ideas out there that we haven't discussed. We end up just kind of talking about the community center again, but I think that people will have some interesting ideas about what goes in that center and what kind of programs they really want to see. And if you're talking to someone who's 80, they might have a different point of view than someone who's 17. So I do think, George, you're right, that getting an array of voices is going to be key to making, it isn't the heading, it isn't the topic heading that's going to make it or break it. It's reaching out to people and getting them to respond.
as a group, we can decide anything, but let me just point out a couple of things. So if the topic is community safety and police reform, most of the discussion will be about police.
Yeah.
If the topic is community safety without the words police reform, that's going to get you some different input. That may include fire, it may include ambulance, which is highly topical right now. And if instead of the words community safety, you use community services, that would also get you a different set of topics. So kind of just be careful. If you want to do community safety and police reform, recognize that it's fundamentally about policing. You may get some input on recreation programs, but it will be incidental, right? If you said recreation, you're going to get input fundamentally about recreation. If you broaden it to community services, you will get that. So pick the words carefully because it will drive what people come forth with, right? And they're different. And I'm okay with whatever we all decide collectively.
Yeah, I think that's something that I appreciated about the version that Molly articulated is that she brought in, just to reread it back to the group, what do you see as a key Beacon community connection and safety need that the city should be providing? I'm thinking about, speaking of words, because I absolutely agree with you that the different words, we have to use them intentionally. I hear us all saying sort of interchangeably recreation center and community center, and those are different things. And so I would like to hear feedback about a community center much more than I'd like to hear feedback about a recreation center. But, and not to now put George on the spot, but I know this is one of your topics, and I'm wondering, George, if you have an articulation of what it is that you really want to hear from people. That's a central question.
I think it's, I don't see a recreation center and a community center as two separate things. I think we need to begin thinking of recreation as a broader thing as opposed to not just sports and basketball hoops and pickleball courts. I think it has to represent and be a place of community, a place where social services are available, where senior services are available, where there's a community kitchen available. So it's a much broader umbrella under which a lot of things are discussed. And I want a place for both, for that sort of synergy between a 17-year-old and an 80-year-old, to that magic to happen, that potential, and the things that they can offer one another. So I would like to see that under one roof, and I believe, that's as valuable as, a basketball tournament, which is great. But this is something, we have to broaden our definition of what recreation is. So I would love for it, and I agree with Lee, that by talking about police reform, it's going to trigger a whole different dialogue that we go into. And I believe what Justice is saying about safety does involve all these things. And so it can be safety and community and services. And I think what I'd like to find out from the public is how best do they want their money spent, and what is this community lacking right now? And I think the pandemic showed us a lot of things that lack for a large part of our community, and we as a city were incapable of sort of filling these holes, these necessary needs in the community. Luckily, we have great volunteers here that did it, but it took a great amount of scrambling, and I think the city needs to step up and participate in that as well. So I don't know if that was an answer to your question.
No, it was. How best do you want your money, your tax dollars spent, and what is the community lacking right now?
Which is in line with what Molly was saying as well, I think, and Justice.
Okay. Well, since I did suggest that we open this up for at least a public comment, a regular public comment session next Monday, maybe I'll take this time to take a stab at consolidating the answers that we all gave. I think there's a pretty clear through line amongst all of them around wanting to know what resources are lacking, around perhaps more clearly articulated community safety as opposed to specifically police reform, or possibly just community services is the other version I heard. And we can, those were the items. Come up with phrase our topic into a central question, pick a forum event date, and it seems like through nods, we all agree about the 3 goals of the framework that we started this discussion with.
Yeah.
We're all good with that part?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just give you, as you were articulating that,
Sure.
if it were something around community services where you had the kicker that says, either that might encourage safety, encourage unity, encourage belonging, or other things. So it kind of says, because I think the safety element is what if we're not going to do just police reform, we're doing something broader. I think services might be the right word, but then you want to include sort of what are some of the implications of those services. Do they encourage safety? Do they encourage kind of unity? Oh, sorry. He says I'm not talking into the mic.
Correct.
But anyway, that's what I was trying to get at. So just think about that as you put it together. I'm sure you'll do a great job. But that's kind of what I heard as you were saying it back. Okay.
If you want to set a tentative time, we can also see if we can line up the Memorial Hall, which we should do in advance,
yeah.
just to make sure there's not a conflict. So if you want to set a date, we can take care of calling them.
Yeah. Did we agree on April 30th?
We did.
Is that the one?
I think we agreed on April 30th. We didn't agree on a time.
Correct.
That's a Saturday, so it shouldn't be a problem with bingo, I believe.
Maybe we can get Chris to check on that date or just around that date, so in case there's a conflict for the facility. I would love us to use Memorial Building, and my preference is to always use that building. Right. Good. Okay. We good?
I think so.
Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
Good. Okay. Other stuff. I got one item, which is, I was mentioning to Ren, there's been a series in the Poughkeepsie Journal on housing. There's 3 articles, longish articles. They're relying or starting to use some of the data in the housing study in positive ways. And they weren't at all, they're more like research-oriented articles trying to develop a problem or description. One is on affordability, one was on Section 8, and one was on, I'm forgetting the last one. I'll figure out how to get them printed out and delivered to everyone. What I would ask you all to look at, we got a preliminary view of the county housing study. It's not going to change dramatically. Ren and I went through it and then talked to the county about it. They're going to do some additions, but there's no fundamental changes that are occurring. So taking a read of it now would be useful. The reason I'm asking you to do it is I know we all needed a break from housing stuff for a little while, but I think we're starting to kind of, re-get our energy again, and I'd like us to start to tackle it. There's a set of initiatives, or proposals we stuck on the table a year ago. I'd like us to start coming back to it and start having discussions. I think you'll find in the housing study and in most kind of comprehensive looks at how you work on housing that a lot of the issues are sitting there. And I think the other thing, and I'm going to ask John Clerk to help us on this, is if we look at where we are relative to other communities in the region, I think we will discover we're well ahead of almost everyone. And that's not a reason to do nothing. It's actually a reason to stay on the ball and stay ahead. but I'd like us to look at that. And again, you've seen a lot of the data, Ren, so I think you know some of the stuff. But if you could all start to just take a look, we'll start to spend some time to go through it together, and I'll get you those articles. They're very well-written, and they cover a lot of ground.
So are you suggesting, Lee, that we can talk about this at our next workshop in 2 weeks, potentially, things related to housing?
Yeah, I just got to work on kind of getting the background to it and whether we're ready. So I'm not 100% sure. I got to work with the administrator on that and with our planner. So.
And we've tentatively invited, or more than tentatively invited, the architect for the Tompkins Hose Firehouse consolidation and renovation to come and speak on that day. So I'd like to leave a good amount of time for that conversation because it's a presentation and then a back and forth with the council.
Okay. Yeah, so it may not happen immediately, but I just want us to start getting ready, all right? Because Chris tends to tee stuff up in a particular order, and I get my wrist slapped if I get too ahead of him. You don't think I like this administrator, do you?
You clearly don't get along.
Yeah.
Ren, do we know when the official report is coming out from the county?
You know, I do not, but I can find that answer for you.
Ren is going to find the answer.
All right.
When it's coming out?
Yeah, the final version.
I bet you it's within 30 days. You've got, do you have any more meetings scheduled?
There are no more meetings scheduled. They're coalescing the comments, the final steering committee comments, and yeah, the next draft, I will let you know, Paolo.
Right, because remember from our call, it was, can you put together a toolkit? And then can you flesh out that concept of a planning compact akin to the Greenway Compact, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it looked mostly complete. I just didn't see much that was missing.
I just feel like we've been teasing this study for the public for several months, and I think they should have access to it.
Yeah, they lagged on the last set of revisions, and it changed the whole calendar. They're presenting it to the Chamber of Commerce on April 20th.
All right, so it's going to be done.
So it's close to cooked.
And just a reminder, Mayor, so the workshop after the next one, we've invited the Main Street Access Committee to do a download of everything they've been working on.
Okay, so those are all meaty topics and are timely.
They're also presenting to the Ledge on April 7th, so we're looking at very early in April.
Okay. All right, so upcoming soon.
We haven't had any 4-hour meetings in a while, so.
Well, I'm ready.
Right? Okay.
What is this, 8:40? Lame.
Anybody want to go out bowling?
Roller derby?
All right.
Chrissy and me.
Is there beer?
All right, we call it an evening?
Yes.
All right, thank you all.